Something shifted in the Persian Gulf 2 days ago, and most people still don't understand what it means. 3 American warships entered one of the most strategically dangerous waterways on Earth. From the Iranian shoreline, Revolutionary Guard commanders tracked them through their scopes. The destroyers looked exposed. They looked slow. They looked like exactly the kind of target Iran had been training for decades to hit. That was the point. What unfolded in the next few minutes wasn't just a military skirmish. It was a carefully engineered trap, one so precisely constructed that Iran walked directly into it, activated its most sensitive hidden infrastructure, and handed the United States real-time intelligence it had been searching for years to obtain. By the time Tehran understood what had happened, it was already too late. The coastline was burning. Satellite imagery captured the aftermath. And a network Iran had spent 30 years building, concealing, protecting, and positioning as its primary leverage over global oil flow had been partially stripped away in a single operation. This is the story of how the U.S. Navy turned Iran's own doctrine against it, and what it means for the fragile ceasefire now hanging by a thread. The date was May 7th, 2026. The location, the Strait of Hormuz. 3 Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, the USS Truxtun, USS Rafael Peralta, and USS Mason, were moving through the strait in a formation that looked, on the surface, like a standard naval transit. To Iranian commanders watching from the coast, the picture seemed almost too good. 3 of America's most advanced surface combatants, moving slowly through Iran's most heavily monitored stretch of water, with no visible air cover and no obvious escort. But this wasn't a routine patrol. It was a provocation, by design. American military planners had constructed a deliberate tactical scenario, one built on a deep understanding of how Iran fights. For years, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy has operated what military analysts call a mosquito fleet doctrine. Rather than meeting American naval power head-to-head, Iran relies on swarming tactics, waves of fast attack boats, shore-launched cruise missiles, drone strikes, and coordinated harassment, launched from concealed positions scattered along the Gulf coastline and nearby islands. It's an asymmetric system. It's meant to overwhelm, confuse, and exhaust a technologically superior opponent, rather than defeat it in direct engagement. And for decades, the locations of those hidden launch sites, staging facilities, and drone depots had remained largely unknown. On May 7th, Iran's IRGC took the bait. The moment Iranian forces initiated their attack against the 3 destroyers, a network of American intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance assets, including radar aircraft, surveillance drones, satellites, and shipboard tracking systems, lit up simultaneously. Every launch signature was captured. Every attack vector was traced. In real time, every origin point was mapped. In seconds, the U.S. military had done something it couldn't achieve through passive intelligence collection alone. It had forced Iran to voluntarily reveal the operational locations of its most sensitive hidden infrastructure. The strikes that followed were rapid and targeted. Reported locations hit included IRGC-connected positions near Keshem Island, Bandar Abbas, Bandar Kamir, and Sirik. A string of coastal sites representing years of construction, concealment, and investment. Coastal missile launcher platforms were struck. Drone staging areas were destroyed. Fast attack boat depots were hit. Weapon storage and logistics facilities connected to the assault network were eliminated. Not a single American destroyer was damaged. This is where the real significance becomes clear. Iran didn't just lose infrastructure. It lost the cloak of invisibility it had built that infrastructure around. The concealment was the strategy. Without it, the weapons are just weapons. And the United States had just demonstrated it could see through the fog. Satellite imagery available on public mapping platforms already shows the aftermath. Near the Omani side of the strait, the burn signatures from destroyed IRGC fast attack boats are visible. What Iran spent decades hiding, the U.S. eliminated in hours. But the military strike was only half the story. The other half was already unfolding inside Tehran, and it was arguably more dangerous. Iran is not a monolith. Behind its public statements and diplomatic silences lies a fractured power structure, one where the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the civilian government of Iran operate as competing factions with fundamentally different visions for the country's future. The IRGC wants war, or at minimum, it wants confrontation, because confrontation is the source of its institutional power, its budget, and its political relevance. Every missile fired, every naval skirmish, every moment of tension with the United States reinforces the IRGC's argument that Iran needs its military wing more than ever. The civilian government sees things differently. It understands that Iran's economy is under severe pressure, that its population is exhausted, and that a negotiated exit from this conflict, even one with uncomfortable compromises, may be the only path to long-term stability. This internal battle is not theoretical. Major American media outlets reported on it directly. The IRGC is actively working to undermine diplomatic progress, pressuring civilian leadership not to accept U.S. proposals, and using its influence over Iranian state institutions to slow-roll any movement toward a deal. And that slow rolling became critically visible this week. 3 days before the May 7th operation, the United States had sent Iran a Memorandum of Understanding, a 30-day framework proposal under which both sides would agree to negotiate. The naval blockade around the strait would be lifted, and commercial shipping through the Persian Gulf would resume. It wasn't a peace treaty. It was a structured pause, a diplomatic on-ramp, designed to give Tehran's civilian government a face-saving way to enter talks. The deadline for Iran's response was yesterday. Iran said nothing. No acceptance, no rejection, no formal communication through the Pakistan channel, which has been serving as the back-channel mediator in these talks. No statement from Tehran, no confirmation from Washington. Silence. And in diplomacy, silence from a country that knows the clock is running is rarely accidental. President Trump addressed it directly, confirming both the deadline and Iran's non-response. He also reintroduced a name that has become central to American strategy in the region: Project Freedom. Project Freedom is the U.S. operation under which American warships escort commercial vessels through the Strait of Hormuz, bypassing Iran's ability to use the strait as leverage by making unauthorized interdiction politically and militarily untenable. The program had been paused as a concession, a show of goodwill to give Iran's diplomats space to work. But Trump made the calculus explicit. If Iran refuses to engage, Project Freedom restarts. And not just restarts. What he described as Project Freedom Plus. A broader, more intensive version of the operation that could include additional military systems beyond naval escorts. There's a secondary layer to this that received less attention, but matters enormously. Saudi Arabia and Bahrain, the Gulf states whose airspace and military bases are essential to any sustained American operation in the region, were reportedly unhappy. Unhappy that Project Freedom was announced and then paused without meaningful consultation. These are the countries whose infrastructure the United States depends on to project power in the Gulf. Their buy-in isn't optional, it's operational. And their frustration is a signal that American coalition management in the region is under internal strain, even as external pressure on Iran mounts. The trap sprung on May 7th exposed Iran's coastal network, but the diplomatic trap is closing just as tightly, and Tehran's silence is making it worse. What happened in the Strait of Hormuz on May 7th cannot be undone. The physical damage destroyed launch platforms, burned staging sites, eliminated drone depots, represents years of investment and construction. Rebuilding it will take time Iran may not have. And rebuilding it in secret, now that the United States has demonstrated it can force a reveal through precision provocation, will be exponentially harder. The strategic damage runs deeper. Iran's entire asymmetric naval doctrine was built on one assumption: that its coastal infrastructure was invisible. That invisibility is now gone, or at minimum, deeply compromised. Future IRGC commanders will operate with the knowledge that activating their network against American targets may instantly expose everything connected to it. The economic pressure is compounding simultaneously. The strait remains the choke point for roughly 20% of global oil flow. Every day of uncertainty translates into market volatility. Every week without a negotiated framework pushes Iran's already strained economy closer to the edge. Globally, the reaction has been cautious. China and Russia have urged restraint without offering concrete intervention. Gulf states are watching the U.S. Iran dynamic closely, recalculating their own positioning. The international community understands that another major military exchange in the strait would send shockwaves through global energy markets in a way that no economy is currently positioned to absorb. Inside Iran, the power struggle between the IRGC and the civilian government is reaching a point of decision. The ceasefire cannot survive indefinitely if neither side moves. And Iran's silence on the Memorandum of Understanding is forcing Washington toward a harder posture. The next 48 to 72 hours may define the trajectory of this conflict for months. A deal is still possible, but the window is narrowing. The infrastructure is burning. The hardliners are pushing, and the world is watching, waiting to see whether Tehran blinks or whether this strait becomes the center of something far larger. The trap has been sprung. What happens next is no longer in America's hands. Let us know your thoughts below in comment section, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more.